Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel, Megs & Co. in the studio. My name is Meg. I am the yarn dyer behind Megs & Co. and my YouTube channel is all about yarn. Today I have something really cool to share with you. I feel like I say that every episode, but this one is going to be different. We are in the yarn dyeing room. We are going to be dyeing yarn today. It is going to be another tutorial where I'm sharing step by step and I'm sharing recipes today. So if you want to learn more about yarn dyeing, if you want to get your hands virtually dirty, so to speak, this one's for you. And if you love mini skeins, this one's for you. So get cozy and let's get to work. So I don't know about you, but I feel like the past few years has been all about mini skein fever, and it just seems like every month there's a new mini skein that's coming out, a new countdown box. Everything's all about the advents. I'm here for it. I love it. And I thought it would be so much fun to put together our own mini skein collection in the spirit of countdown season. And thanks to Knomad Yarns, oh my gosh, I almost dumped this out. Thank you to Knomad Yarns that sent me another bundle of yarn. This is their Clover DK minis. These are non-superwash mini skeins and they are DK weight. I'm so excited to be working with these. For one, it's non-superwash, which I have been really excited to work with more and more. It's kind of what I'm preferring to knit and crochet with more and more, to be quite honest. And so because of that, it's kind of what I'm preferring to dye even more and more. And I'm really loving that it's DK weight. There's so many great colorwork projects, I don't know, doodles that are coming out that are so exciting, so much fun. Yeah, in case you are interested, I do have a great community over on Discord. And we kind of started a very impromptu doodle along. If you don't know what a doodle is, you have to look up Jamie Lomax. She's a knitwear designer. She goes by Pacific Knit Co. on Instagram, and she puts out these doodle patterns where you essentially mix and match your own colorwork motifs, and you can create your own projects that are just so unique, so cool, so different, so fun, and you can make them as traditional or fun as you want them depending on the motifs that you pick. And she's got holiday themed ones, seasonal, all of the things. So she recently just put out a sweater pattern for holiday sweaters. So a bunch of us over in that Discord chat are doing we all want to cast on one of these sweaters. And so unofficially we are spiriting each other along to do a winter themed doodle sweater. And so what better way than with a bundle of mini skeins. And of course, DK weight mini skeins are what the actual pattern calls for, so even better. And it being November, we are getting into Advent season, countdown season, I should say. And there's nothing more fun than counting down to your favorite holiday or the end of the year or your birthday with your favorite thing. And I don't know about you, but my favorite thing is yarn. So let's go over this yarn. So one of these packages very conveniently comes with 25 mini skeins. So how perfect that you could get one of these packages and essentially create your own countdown. I think a really fun idea would be to even like split a package with a friend. And I guess you'd have to fight over the extra skein, but you could do like 12 and 12 and then swap your skeins. I think that would be like a really fun idea to like dye 12 skeins for yourself, and then your friend takes the other half and dyes 12 skeins, and then you can wrap them up for each other and do like an advent swap kind of a thing. And like you said, you know, we call them advents, but you know, you don't have to count down to Christmas. You can count down to whatever you want. You know, you want to count down to, you know, the next concert you're going to. I think that's a phenomenal idea. So these are DK weight minis. So they are 100% fine merino wool. Each mini is 20 grams non-superwash, and they are 49 yards or 45 meters. 4-ply, and that is all the information I have. So I had originally planned to do 12, just to kind of split the pack in half, but then I ended up, there's a fruit fly down here. Go away, fly. Awkward. I had originally planned to do 12 to just kind of split the pack in half, but then I couldn't decide on a couple colors. So I said, you know, what the heck, let's just add some more. So we ended up with, how many jars do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I ended up with deciding on 16 minis that I'm going to be dyeing. And that may seem like a lot, but I've come up with, I think, an easy way that we can manage all of these skeins in a very manageable way. So this is a system that I tend to use when I am either testing new dyes or if I'm trying to test new recipes. I'll set up these jars, and this way I can do mini skeins and I can very quickly develop a dye recipe by making micro adjustments to my formulations essentially, and see very quickly in side by side, you know, how the differences and the adjustments that I'm making look, or if I'm perhaps testing a new dye. Usually I like to dye like a 1%, and then, you know, a couple other shades of that just to kind of see how that dye works. So we'll set up these jars and then I can drop all my minis in, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I thought, to make things easier, instead of dealing with 16 different jars of dyes, I picked 8, and we're just going to do 2 different depths of the shade for each of those 8 dyes, right? Maybe I picked 16. No. Yeah, yes, that's correct. The math is mathing. The math is mathing. I picked 8 dyes, and we're going to do 2 different depths of shade for each one. So we are going to end up with 16 different colors, but we only need 8 jars of dyes, or 8 colors. So that way you don't have to necessarily purchase as many dyes if you wanted to follow this tutorial exactly. To minimize your costs even more, you could potentially pick your top 4 colors and just do different shades, so more of a gradient set. So let's dive in. Let's get to work. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to need some gloves. I hope that, my mask is not in here. I'm going to have to run into my other room because I don't know where I left my mask from the last time. Okay, so we're going to start mixing up our dyes. So we're going to be making a lot of small measurements over and over, essentially. So what I want to do is I want to make a 1% stock solution of each of those 8 dyes that I want to use in my countdown collection here that I'm doing. And because I'm only going to be dyeing 1 20-gram skein, and we're going to be doing 2 different depths of shade, so I'm only going to be weighing out half a gram and then diluting that in 50 mils of water. So 0.5 grams and 50 milliliters of water is still going to give us that 1% dye solution. We've just reduced it down. I don't want to reduce down what I'm weighing on my scale any further. So I am going to end up with some excess dye that I will use. It's what I end up using for like my wildflower batches. So I'm definitely going to save all this dye and use it up on yarn. But there will be quite a bit left over. Probably about a third of the dye will be left over. I don't like to go any lower than that on my scale just because it just starts to introduce a little bit of air. For somebody who is not worried about repeatability, I would say that it's more than okay to try to measure your point. You'd probably need about 0.3 to be able to do the recipe that we're going to do. You could definitely measure 0.3 grams. It's a teeny tiny amount, 0.3 grams, and put that in 30 milliliters of water, all 8 of your dyes. It's going to be a teeny amount, and that will be enough to do all of this. So if you didn't want to use that waste, or if you didn't know if you'd have a project to be able to use that dye up. If you followed this exactly, there are quite a bit of mini skeins left over, so you could take that excess dye and use it up on those other mini skeins to start, you know, mixing and matching your color. Okay, so let's get to work. So the tools that I have my trusty scale. I'm going to be measuring just in my favorite plastic measuring cups. I use one of these long milkshake spoons. I have a graduated cylinder that I like to use for measuring my water. You can measure water. I wouldn't recommend this size to measure such a small volume of water, but you can get a measuring cup as well to measure your water. And then I also have Post-its, so that because we're going to have 8 different mixes of dye, the bench here is going to get crowded really fast. So I'm going to label everything to keep us organized. And then I also have my stirrer. I just like to use this little kitchen whisk, and it's just some clean water so that I can kind of wash my stirrer and my tools in between each. And then I've got a pile of rags here as well so that I can kind of clean everything in between as we're going, because space is going to get very cramped very quickly. So because of that, I think I'm actually going to mix up my the water that we want to put in the jars first, so that I can get rid of some of this. So in each of these jars, just like we were going to cook yarn in a pan, we need water. I always add just a little touch of dish soap just to help break that surface tension and help push any residual spinning oils away. And then citric acid, because instead of filling our whole pan, because we have such, you know, teeny tiny amounts in our jars, I'm going to make up kind of a master mix of citric acid water and just pour it into each. I'm just going to top this one up. I like to pour with this one better because it has a spout. So I'm just going to so this is just my little dish soap here. I have citric acid. I'm just doing a tablespoon. And I'm just going to give that a good stir until I don't see any particles. If you don't have citric acid, you can use vinegar. Citric acid is nice because it's completely odorless. I personally just find hot vinegar to be a little much on the nose. Okay, and then I'm just going to fill each one of these just about halfway. Just about that. And what I'm using, these are Wegmans pickle jars. I eat a lot of pickles, as you can tell. But any leftover jar, as long as it's nice and clean, so you don't have any anything residual on it that might transfer color or oil or anything to your yarn. So mason jars, I was gonna say like a sauce jar. I would just be very careful that there wasn't any like, that one's very full, any like residual red, but any glass jar that is essentially like safe, any kind of pickling style jar that's safe to be on heat. And I have it in my hotel tray, which does have water because we are going to apply this to heat and I don't need that glass to be, you know, shattering. So it is going to be kind of cooking in a water bath. Will I have enough? I'll do a little bit of this, I feel like. So let's talk about the dyes that we're going to use. All of the dyes you can get on Dharma Trading. They are all acid dyes. So the first one it's a different brand, but you can still get it on Dharma Trading. It is called Jaquard Salmon. One of my favorites. It's such a bright, intensive, like kind of salmon pink color. Really great color. Then we've got Dharma brand Plum Dandy. And you can see so many of my dyes are just very well loved, very well used. We've got Dharma Pecan Brown. We have Dharma Teal Green. I don't know if you'll be able to read that one. It's pretty beat up. This is Dharma Blue Steel. If you watched my previous tutorial that was very in-depth on dyeing non-superwash yarn, this was one of the dyes that I used in that tutorial as well. So if you potentially had already tried that tutorial, then you already have this dye. The next one is Dharma Aubergine. And I will say as well, with the teal green, I was actually going back and forth between teal green and using the forest green that I had also used in the previous tutorial, with the reason being that if you were following along and had purchased the blue steel and the forest green, then you would have those two colors, and so it would be a little bit less of a purchase to get these new colors that we're going to use. But I really love teal green, and I also wanted to share a different color than I had before. But if you have forest green from the previous video, I think it's going to work really well with this collection of colorways. So if you were on the fence about, you know, purchasing another green color, I think sticking with forest green, you know, and, you know, maybe purchasing teal later on is going to work very well. Oh, no. How many do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I guess we have 7. Okay. To recount. The next one that we have is Dharma Tobacco Leaf. Really great color. Okay. So all of these are going to be mixed in exactly the same way. So I will show you one time in like kind of real time, and then probably, you know, do some YouTube magic to speed up time. What did I do? There it is. For safety, whenever you start working with the dry dye powders, you always want to be wearing a mask. It's just never good to be breathing these in. If you have access to the N95 respirator mask, this is what you should be wearing because it's going to make a nice tight seal around your mouth, and it has the proper filters for filtering out those fine particles. The N95 I guess disposable is the second best choice. I wear these in my tutorials so that my voice isn't muffled, but otherwise I'd be wearing my traditional respirator. Okay, so I use my little jewelry scale here. I hit the tare button with my container on top so that it is balanced. Give my spoon a good wash. We're going to be measuring these all the same exact way, so it doesn't matter where you start. For me, I'm going to be doing 0.5. This is how much I'm starting with, like not a lot. Just tiny scoops. Gonna take a teeny tiny bit out. Okay. So just to give you an idea of just how little dye that we're gonna be working with, like that's it. That's it. So to my 0.5, I'm going to be adding 50 mils. So that's it. That's all. And I'm going to label it. And keep going. We have successfully finished measuring out all of our dyes. I have 7 dyes in total. I thought I had 8, but we have 7. That's fine. We have 7. Which just means that now we have some extra jars and skeins to play with. So I'm going to give each one of these a good stir with my whisk. And I always just want to be checking for like any clumps and whatnot. Like every dye is a little bit different. Some dyes go into solution really easily and they're not problems at all. Some just like to kind of chunk up or like turn into like a little gel before they want to go into solution. And then I just rinse off my whisk in between each one. So I'm just going to keep repeating that. Okay, I'm also going to get the heat going on this. And let's start adding our color. So for each one, I'm going to do a 1% and a 0.1%. So what that means is that I'm going to be adding 20 mils of our 1% solution. Since we have a 20-gram skein, adding 20 milliliters of 1% dye solution would be applying 1% of dye at a 1% depth of shade per weight of wool. All I'm doing is flushing out my little syringe here, making sure there's no leftover dye from my last experiments. And then to do a 0.1, we essentially have to do a 1 to 10 dilution, which means instead of 20 mils, we are only adding 2 milliliters of our solution that we just prepared here. So to do that, because we are now going to be working in very small amounts, we were already working in small amounts, but now we're going to be working in even less amounts. I like to use these syringes. Funny enough, this is actually a syringe that is meant for dispensing Jell-O shots that I got at a party store, but it works perfectly. And then this one you can get at pharmacies that like for dispensing medication to babies, or I think it's from my dogs essentially. So this one is 5 mils. So this one's a 5 mil syringe. This one, the graduations are starting to come off of it, but it is a 50 mil syringe. So I'm going to put 20 mils of each dye, just kind of working my way down, and then I will put 2 mils of each dye on the other side. Probably would have made sense to do it like when we had just mixed it up, because everything settles out pretty quick, but that's okay. We'll do it this way. Ugh. Sometimes these syringes can be a little tough to go, but so we're just gonna shoot that dye right in there. And then I just draw it up a couple times to just really flush out that tip. And just make sure all that dye is gone. And then since this is Plum Dandy. This is one of those dyes that can be a little bit of a problem. It's a beautiful dye, but it can be a little finicky to work with, I'm not gonna lie. So it's one of those ones that comes out of solution very fast. You just gotta keep at it, keep stirring it. It's a very beautiful color. See how beautiful that color is. So we're just going to keep working down, and again, the order doesn't matter because we're only going to put one skein in each of our jars. Since counting does seem to be a challenge for me, I went and grabbed the container of Forest Green. This is the dye that we used in the previous video. So I'm gonna mix up a solution of this, so then that way we can see how that dye would look in this collection for those of you that perhaps went and purchased this dye to follow along with that tutorial. It's such a pretty color. It's such like a nice dark forest green. Haha. I think it's just so appropriate for this time of year when the evergreen trees are kind of having their moment. Now that all the leaves are starting to fall. Like that. Come on. This part's exciting. I'm going to give each one of these a stir. There's just regular water, just regular tap water that's in this water bath pan. So I'm just using it to rinse my spoon in between each jar so that I'm not transferring dye from jar to jar. And I'm starting with the lightest jar first, because then it doesn't really matter that I'm transferring dye over into the darkest jar. Honestly, there would be so little bit of dye on the spoon that even if you stirred the dark jar first, it shouldn't make that big of a difference. so pretty. Look at that. All these jars are just gorgeous. Okay, yay, now is the fun part. We get to start adding our yarn. I'm gonna wipe my hands because they are a little gross. So this is a non-superwash yarn, and you want to make sure that you are always taking the time to properly soak and wash your non-superwash yarn before you dye it. Non-superwash yarn has not gone through the same rigorous chemical treatments that a superwash yarn has gone through. So it just hasn't been washed and bleached and chemically treated in the same manner that a superwash yarn has done. So it's not as squeaky clean as a superwash yarn is. That's not bad. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it. It's yarn. It comes from an animal. It comes from the field. It's spun in a factory and then stored in a warehouse. Like, it's not surprising that you're going to find dirt and oils in your yarn. So we want to make sure that we're washing all of that away before we put it in the dye, because all of that can interfere with how well the yarn takes the dye. Non-superwash treated yarn is also naturally hydrophobic, meaning it's going to resist the water. That's actually what makes merino wool so wonderful and well suited for athletic wear, because it's going to help wick that water away from you. And so because of that, you really want to take the time to soak the yarn so that it really can take the time to properly wet and absorb that water. So I set this up last night. So I would say at a bare minimum, if you can soak your yarn for an hour, if you can plan ahead, the day before is always best. And then I prepped these minis by stringing them on some curling ribbon that you can just get at like the dollar store. Because these are mini skeins, usually I like to prep my yarn on zip ties, but zip ties can get to be a little big and bulky for mini skeins when you're just doing one at a time. So I find that the curling ribbon works perfectly. And this way too, if you're doing experiments where you're testing out different dye recipes and you don't necessarily know how they're going to turn out, or maybe you're working with, you're testing out different yarn bases and different blends of yarn, you can use different colored ribbons to help you with your note taking. So the blue ribbon is one recipe, and the red ribbon is where you tweaked just a little thing, so that way you can see exactly how it turned out. Because trust me, when you have a whole series of these set up and you've just done minor adjustments, when you have all this yarn done at the end of the day, you're like, oh no, which recipe went with which yarn? Like, I've made that mistake before. So marking them all with individual colors and then taking the notes of how you've marked them going back to the recipe will really help you out and help you on your way to success. So these are all pretty wet. Like I said, I've been soaking overnight. So we are just going to dunk each one into the jar. All of these colors are pretty individual and unique, so I don't really need to worry about like which color tie goes into which dye. So I'm not really worried about telling them apart. And one of the things I'm doing is wringing out that extra water, just mostly so it doesn't drip. And whenever you wring out your yarn, you always want to use that downward motion where you're running your hands down kind of with the grain of the yarn. You don't want to wring and twist and squeeze your yarn, because you don't want to do anything that is going to agitate the yarn in a way that causes the strands to rub together in a way that causes friction, that might cause it to felt. So non-superwash yarn can felt. One of the advantages of dyeing in jars like this is you really minimize the opportunity for the yarn to rub up against itself and each other because they're in these little tiny jars versus being kind of spread out in a pan. But we still need to be careful. Okay. And now I'm just going to make sure that the yarn is kind of properly exposed to the dye. So I'm pulling it up out of the dye and moving it along this ribbon. And again, you don't want to do anything that's going to cause like friction or anything. Just want to make sure that everything is well exposed. And I'm going to work through the lighter colors first because those are going to fix kind of the fastest. So I want to make sure that, you know, that I'm working through them so I don't get any bare spots. The bare spots are going to appear kind of on the top, you know, where the yarn's exposed, where it's kind of floating on the top, and usually along this tie. If I was doing this in any kind of professional manner, I wouldn't have dunked them all at once. I would have worked jar to jar, but this is perfectly fine. All that to say, if you are worried about things like not coming out perfectly even, you could do this step. Like instead of putting them all in at once, you could put one skein in, do this step, then put in your next skein, do this step. Unfortunately, these jars are not very hot yet, so you can go right in and their hands. So you can see how like there's that white spot on the top. So we just want to make sure we're getting all the yarn in to avoid that. And as you're going jar to jar, especially when you're going from more saturated colors like this teal to this salmon, just making, you know, check your gloves, check your hands, making sure that you don't have globs of dye so that you don't end up with, you know, some kind of spot on your dye, because that would be very, or on your yarn, that would be very unfortunate to, yeah, see I've got a whole bunch of blue, so I'm just gonna use this water bath as a sink to keep my hands clean. Because I don't want spots. Oh, there isn't a skein in that one. I was wondering why I had an extra skein in here. I thought maybe I just miscounted. It's kind of funny. Get that right in there. also a really great way to kind of get to know your dyes. You're going to see that some dyes are going to strike much faster than other dyes. Some are going to take a really long time compared to others to exhaust. Some, you know, aren't going to exhaust until the heat gets to a certain point. You'll see that more with the reds and the purples. And I think when you kind of see that side by side, you know, where all other parameters are kept equal, I think it's a really good way to kind of see how much, you know, the different dyes really can impact your dyeing. That, you know, sometimes it really isn't about your method. It really can be about your dye. You know, sometimes, you know, I get messages, you know, about, oh, you know, I'm doing this, I'm having this problem. And sometimes it's not you. It really can be just the materials, and sometimes learning how to kind of work with the materials a little bit, because they want to work against you sometimes, unfortunately. So doing these kinds of experiments are a great way to see the range of colors you can get from your dyes. I always find it fascinating just how differently the colors you can get from just one dye. So I love to see that range of colors, and then I love just to see how differently the dyes can behave compared to each other. So you can see, like, this teal is almost completely exhausted. So is this salmon. But then, like, this brown, not even close. This blue, this guy's gonna take a while as well. So I already kind of have a little bit of an idea of who's gonna need a little bit more heat. So my heat is up here. So I am going to rearrange. So the more saturated colors are always going to need more heat. It's kind of always a given. Do a little bit of that to give priority to some of the colors that are just going to need a little bit of time. Believe it or not, that's all there is to it. I'm going to continue to let this cook until every single one of these jars is completely exhausted. And how we will know it's exhausted is when the dye in the jars is clear or close to being clear. So this is a particular colorway that I know probably will get clear. But if you've been cooking these and it has been a good hour and it's a well saturated color, like probably the Plum Dandy, and it's still this kind of cloudy-ish color, you're good, you're fine, pull it off, it's good. And I'll come back and check in and we'll take a look at where we are when things are good. But I'm gonna let these cook. Probably gonna let them cook for about a half hour. I'll keep checking. You wanna keep, you know, kind of stirring around. Again, you don't wanna agitate these. These are non-superwash yarns, so you don't wanna really be poking around and agitating too much. But if you can, just, you know, making sure that you're keeping things, you know, from settling in a way that might create like blotchy spots. Or if you notice that the yarn is kind of floating back up towards the surface, you can always add more water if it also looks like the yarn is coming up too much out of the dye. So yes, you just kind of keep babysitting it a little bit, but for the most part, it just needs time and heat to cook. And then we will wash it and dry it, and it is ready to be shared with a friend. Yeah, like look at this one. I think this one's pretty much Like I'm going to heat it. So it's always good to do a full heat. So even if your dye is exhausted, so this does still have a little tint of blue, but look at how pretty clear that is. Like that's already basically exhausted. So even though it is exhausted, a rule of thumb, I always like to still give it at least that full half hour, 40 minutes on the heat, because you want to make sure that it is permanently fixed. So the dye might be exhausted, but we want to make sure that that chemical reaction is permanent. So I do want to still keep it on the heat for a minimum of 30 minutes, even if they have begun to exhaust already. So I can't stop looking at them. This is, oh my gosh, look at how beautiful. This is like one of my favorite colors. Obsessed, absolutely obsessed. All right, I'm gonna stop because I could just keep fawning over these colors. So let's let them cook, let them be, let them do their thing, and we'll come back and check on them and see where we are. I think we are just about there. You can see how much steam is coming off of this dye bath. So I popped down here one more time and did a little bit of rearranging to anything that had exhausted and was officially done. I had moved over to this tray, and all the colors that needed more time I put over here, and then that way I could pump the heat up on this one pan really high. I'm just limited to the electricity in this room. I can only have like one side of these double burners going. If I have two different burners going, if that makes sense. So this way I could get this whole pan just a little bit hotter, because some of these colors just are going to need a little bit more heat. So these are the colors that are completely done. You can see the water is, whoa, that is not what I wanted to do at all, but you can see the water is just crystal clear. So, you know, it's not surprising that the light colors exhausted first, because there's less dye that went in there. So that dye is not going to need as long to fix to our yarn. So the other color that definitely fixed the fastest is our tobacco. So you can see that that's nice and clear. And this is our 1% tobacco. So that one won the race if we are taking count of our 1% dye solution. So let's take a look. So essentially it's all the 1% that needed a little bit more time. So this is salmon. Look at how intense that color is. I absolutely love it. So you can see this is kind of what salmon does. The water is like, there's no color in the water, even though the water is kind of opaque, and that's totally fine. Because there's no color, it's fine if the water isn't like crystal clear. Some of the dyes just have different like sediments or whatnot that might not allow the water to become clear, but because we don't see color in the water, that is okay. So I'm gonna call that one good. I don't have enough room to move everybody over, and honestly I don't really need to at this point. This is, I think this is our forest green. Nice and clear, looks beautiful. This is steel blue. This actually still has a little bit to go. You can see the water is starting to become clear, but there's still quite a bit of blue in that. So that a little bit more time. This is our teal. And in the last video, this was actually one of the ones that was looked like it hadn't started to dye at all, and the water is completely clear now. So sometimes you just need to adjust the temperature. Some dyes just need more heat to get working, and this is one of those ones that all the teal needed was a little bit of a higher temperature, and it went like that. That's all it needed, was just kind of a little kick in the pants, and it kind of went pretty instantly as soon as we got that heat going. So the teal is done. Pecan Brown. This is one that sometimes doesn't all the way exhaust. It'll do a little bit like what the Salmon did, where the water will be opaque, but it shouldn't have color in it. But this actually went completely clear, so that is absolutely wonderful. Oh, we already looked. Did we look at you? No, this is our purple. This is our Aubergine. So you can see that kind of looks like our steel blue. Still, it's going clear, but it just has a little bit more to go. This is our 0.1% blue steel. All nice and clear, good to go. And this is our 1% plum, which is gorgeous and done. So the only two that still just need a little bit more time are the Aubergine. The 1% Aubergine are purple, are very dark. This is almost like a brownish purple. And our 1% blue steel. So you can see this water bath is really hot. So, you know, kind of to be honest, I'll probably only keep the bath on for maybe another 15-20 minutes, and then I'm just going to turn it off and pretty much call it good. We might just be, you know, as good as we're going to get for these guys, but I'm happy to see that. Oh yeah, we're getting there. See how the water is definitely getting clear. I think we're going to get full exhaustion. So what I'm mumbling through trying to say is that because our pan is so hot, I don't want to keep heating it and risk it like boiling and then, you know, somehow tipping over these jars. So I think we've gotten these pans like as hot as we're really going to get them. So I'm going to keep them on heat for probably about another 20 minutes. Yeah, you can see it's like it really wants to boil. So that's why I just get nervous that keeping the heat on is really not going to help us out at all. But I'm going to keep the yarn exposed to the dye overnight. So it's going to have, because it's so hot, it's going to have more than an hour or so of contact with that nice hot dye. So we should get full exhaustion. When I come down in the morning, that water should really be crystal clear. And it'll be nice and cool, especially when working with non-superwash yarn. It's really good to be patient. Let your yarn cool to room temperature before you wash it. And so all I'm going to do is let it cool and jump out all my jars and give everything a good soak. And I like to use Eucalan. You can use soak wash or just whatever wool-safe detergent you prefer to use. And I'm going to put it on the line, and then I cannot wait to see what this all looks like, all dyed and dried. So yeah, you'll have to come back for part 2. I know it's such a tease, but it does take a couple days to get this dried and whatnot. So in that time, I can get this video edited, and then I can film the part 2 for you. So really excited. I'm really excited to know, what do you guys think of this? Was this fun? Was this exciting? And I really want to know, is this something that you would try at home? And if you do try this at home, please tag me in your Instagram photos. If you post this on Instagram, I am MegsandCo_yarn. If you have any questions about yarn dyeing, if you get stuck, don't struggle alone. Pop over into my Discord chat. I will make sure to link my Discord in the comments. You can find me on Instagram at MegsandCo_yarn, and my Discord server is linked into my IG bio. It's on my website. It's in all the places. yeah, it's a great safe space community over there where we just like to chat. We chat about our knitting projects, our crochet projects. I've got a local group where we like to meet up every Wednesday to create together. But if you have any questions at all, I'd love to answer your questions and to get you on the right path to successful yarn dyeing. So I really hope that you give these recipes a try, or even better, to come up with your own recipes. These are just baselines, and this is just a great way to get started, because you can take these dyes, and the fun really begins when you start mixing them together to blend and create your own colors above and beyond what you can get by just using the dyes in their primary formulation. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you get notified when I post new content, and it lets me know that you like what you're seeing. And I'll see you again.